The candle flame trembled. Elizabeth froze in the doorway of her own laboratory, her hand still gripping the brass handle. The scent hit her first. Bergamot, neroli, and underneath, the whisper of lunar jasmine that had taken her 3 years to perfect. Madame Odile stood at the workbench, her silk sleeve brushing against the scattered vials as she copied the formula into her own leather journal. Her handwriting moved swift and certain across the page. "You are still awake, my dear," Odile said without turning. Her voice carried the warmth of honey poured over broken glass. "I thought you had retired hours ago." Elizabeth stepped into the room. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet. "That formula belongs to me." "Does it?" Odile finally turned. Her smile was immaculate. The gaslight caught the pearls at her throat. "I seem to recall providing you with shelter, training." "Ingredients worth more than your father's debts." She closed the journal with a soft thud. Talent without a patron is merely a hobby for the poor. The words struck like a slap. Elizabeth felt the cold spreading through her chest. 3 years, she whispered. 3 years of my life in those pages. And now those years have purpose. Odile tucked the journal beneath her arm. Memoire d'Étoile will debut at the Duchess of Montfort's ball. The court will adore it. France will remember its scent for generations. She paused at the door. "You should be grateful, child. Your creation will live forever. That is more than most women achieve." The door clicked shut. Elizabeth stood alone among her empty vials. The scent of her stolen masterpiece lingered in the air like a ghost refusing to depart. Dawn painted the Paris sky in shades of ash when Elizabeth reached her family's townhouse. The iron gate hung open. 2 carriages blocked the narrow street. Men in dark coats carried furniture through the front door. She pushed past a porter holding her mother's writing desk. "What is happening here? What are you doing?" The entrance hall had been stripped bare. The wallpaper showed pale rectangles where paintings had hung for 3 generations. The smell of dust and legal documents filled the space. A man stood in the doorway of the morning room, tall, gray at the temples, his coat cut from cloth that whispered of obscene wealth. Baron Armand de Morley turned to face her with the patience of a predator who had already won. "Mademoiselle Duval." His voice was dry leaves scraping across stone. "Your father's debts have finally come due." "My father has been dead for 6 years." "Indeed. And for 6 years I have been exceedingly patient." The Baron pulled a document from his coat. "This property, its contents, and all associated assets are now legally mine. The courts confirmed it yesterday." Elizabeth snatched the paper. The legal phrases blurred before her eyes. Foreclosure, seizure, immediate eviction. "My mother is dying," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. "She cannot be moved." "That is most unfortunate." The Baron's expression did not change. "The physician has already been summoned to oversee her transfer to more appropriate accommodations." Elizabeth ran. Her mother's bedroom smelled of lavender water and approaching death. Marie-Claire Duval lay propped against pillows that seemed to swallow her fragile frame. Her skin had turned to paper. Her breath came in shallow whispers. "Maman?" Elizabeth knelt beside the bed. She took her mother's hand. The fingers were ice. "Elizabeth?" The voice was barely audible. "I heard the commotion."
We must leave. But I will find us somewhere. I will fix this. No. Marie Claire's grip tightened with surprising strength. You cannot fix what they have broken. She pulled Elizabeth closer. Her breath smelled of medicine and fading roses.
Do not let them win. Do not let them take everything. She did not finish the sentence. Her eyes closed, her grip loosened. Two men appeared in the doorway. They wore the Baron's livery. One of them reached for Elizabeth's arm. "Mademoiselle, you must leave now."
Get your hands off me.
They did not listen. They dragged her down the stairs, through the empty hall, past the Baron, who watched with eyes like cold coins. The morning air hit her face as they pushed her onto the street. The door to her family home slammed shut. Rain began to fall 3 days later. It had not stopped since. Elizabeth stood at the edge of the paupers' cemetery on the outskirts of Paris. The grave was a simple hole in the earth. No headstone, no mourners except herself. The priest had already left, his fee paid with the last coins from her mother's hidden purse. The mud sucked at her boots. Water ran down her face, mixing with tears she refused to acknowledge. The silk dress she wore had once been fine. Now it clung to her body like a second skin of grief. Marie Claire Duval, wife, mother, lady of nothing, owner of nothing, remembered by no one who mattered. Elizabeth's fists clenched at her sides. A newspaper blew across the cemetery and caught against her ankle. She looked down. The rain had smeared the ink, but the headline remained legible. Madame Odile Levasseur debut revolutionary fragrance at Ducal Ball. Memoire d'étoile captures hearts of Parisian elite. Below it, a smaller article. Baron de Morley announces major investment in Levasseur Parfumerie. The paper turned to pulp in her hands. Elizabeth lifted her face to the weeping sky. "I swear it," she said aloud. Her voice was steady, her heart was ice. "I will take back everything you stole. I will make you kneel in the ashes of your empires. I will make you remember my name." The rain answered with indifferent violence. The grave filled slowly with water. Elizabeth turned to leave. She stopped. A man stood at the edge of the cemetery. Tall, dark coat, collar raised against the downpour. He did not carry an umbrella. He did not seem to notice the rain at all. He was looking directly at her. Elizabeth's breath caught. On his right hand, barely visible beneath his cuff, she glimpsed a heavy ring, gold, set with a dark stone. The emblem etched into its surface belonged to one of the most exclusive trading houses in Europe, Valmorin and Sons, purveyors of rare essences to royalty and the impossibly wealthy. The man inclined his head, a slight bow, almost mocking. Then he spoke, his voice carrying clearly across the distance despite the storm. "Mademoiselle Duval, I have been waiting to meet you." 4 months had carved hollows beneath Elizabeth's cheekbones. Her hands, once soft as jasmine petals, now bore calluses from the endless harvest. The lavender fields of grass stretched before her like a purple sea, waves of fragrance rising in the Provençal heat. She bent again. Her fingers closed around another stem. The basket on her hip grew heavier with each passing hour. "Faster, Duval!" The overseer's voice cracked like a whip across the rows. "The distillery wagon leaves at noon." Elizabeth did not respond.
She had learned silence in these fields, silence and patience. The other workers knew her only as a disgraced governess from Paris, fallen on hard times. They did not ask questions, they did not care. But her nose never stopped working. She caught it halfway through the morning, a whisper beneath the lavender, something wrong in the discard pile. The other women tossed damaged stems into a wooden crate without a second glance, bruised flowers, wilted leaves, waste for the compost heap. Elizabeth's hand froze over the crate. The scent was impossible. Lunar jasmine had been extinct for 50 years. Every perfumer in Europe mourned its loss. The flower bloomed only under specific conditions, in gardens that no longer existed.
Her father had spent his entire career searching for a single specimen. Yet here it was, hidden beneath rotting lavender. A pale stem with star-shaped petals, crushed but still breathing its secret into the summer air. Elizabeth palmed the flower, her heart hammered against her ribs. "You there, taking a holiday?" "Stomach pains, monsieur. Forgive me." She walked to the edge of the field, clutching her belly with one hand. The jasmine burned against her palm like stolen fire. The port of Marseille stank of fish, tar, and broken dreams. Elizabeth made her way through the evening crowds, her hood pulled low, the flower pressed against her chest in a linen pouch. She had wrapped it in damp cloth, praying it would survive long enough. The tavern she sought crouched at the end of a narrow alley, La Sirène Noire. The painted mermaid above the door had faded to a ghost of green and gold. Inside, smoke hung thick as velvet curtains. Sailors hunched over dice games. Women with tired eyes served cheap wine in cracked cups. Elizabeth scanned the room. He sat in the corner. The same dark coat, the same heavy ring catching the candlelight. The man from the cemetery. She crossed the room and took the seat across from him without invitation. "Mademoiselle Duval." His voice was lower than she remembered, rougher. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, pale against tanned skin. "You found me." "You are not difficult to track, Monsieur Valmorin." She kept her voice steady. "Your trading house has a warehouse in every port. I simply asked which taverns your agents favor." "Lucien?" He lifted his glass. "We shall dispense with formality. You are no longer in a position to observe it, and I never cared for it." "Very well. Lucien?" Elizabeth leaned forward. "How did you know my name? Why were you at the cemetery?" "I make it my business to know the names of talented perfumers, especially those who have been robbed." He drank slowly. "Your Memoire d'Etoile caused quite a sensation at the Montfort ball. Odile could not have created it. She lacks the gift." "That gift has brought me nothing but suffering." "That gift will bring you revenge." He set down the glass. "If you know how to use it. Tell me, what brings you to Marseille? You did not track me across half of France to exchange pleasantries." Elizabeth hesitated. Then she drew the linen pouch from beneath her cloak. "I need to find more of this." Lucien's expression did not change as he unwrapped the jasmine, but his fingers trembled. Just once. "Impossible," he breathed. "Clearly not. I found it in a discard pile in Grasse. Someone is growing it. Someone knows where to find the seeds." "I know where." Lucien rewrapped the flower with exquisite care. "An old collector, dead now. His estate lies abandoned in the hills above Nice. He was mad, they said. Spent 40 years recreating extinct species. His heirs wanted nothing to do with his obsession.
take me there.
The price will be steep. Name it. Lucien smiled. The expression transformed his face, making him almost handsome, almost trustworthy. The price will become clear when you have won, Mademoiselle Duval. For now, consider it an investment. The carriage climbed through darkness. The road grew narrow, then disappeared entirely. They continued on foot, Lucien carrying a lantern that threw dancing shadows across the overgrown path. The greenhouse emerged from the night like a cathedral of glass and rust. Panels hung broken from their frames. Vines had conquered entire walls. The scent hit Elizabeth before they reached the door. Lunar jasmine. Hundreds of plants, thousands of star-shaped flowers glowing silver in the moonlight. She fell to her knees among them. The fragrance wrapped around her like her mother's arms. She saw the townhouse in Paris, the morning room filled with sunlight. Her father's laugh as he lifted her onto his shoulders. Tears streamed down her face. She did not wipe them away. The old man grafted them onto heartier rootstock. Lucien's voice came from somewhere behind her. They bloom only at night, only in autumn. You have perhaps 3 weeks before the frost kills them. Elizabeth gathered herself. She began to harvest, her fingers working with desperate precision.
Why are you helping me?
She did not look up.
What do you want from me, Lucien Valmorin?
Perhaps I simply enjoy watching ambitious women destroy their enemies.
Perhaps you are lying.
Almost certainly.
She worked until dawn began to pale the eastern sky. Her basket overflowed with jasmine, enough to create something unprecedented, something unforgettable, something that would make Odile weep with envy. The carriage waited at the edge of the estate. Lucien helped her inside,
his hand lingering a moment too long on her arm.
Where will you go now? I need a laboratory, equipment, solvents and fixatives.
Elizabeth clutched the basket to her chest.
And I need to become someone else. Elizabeth Duval is dead. She died in that cemetery with her mother.
And who will rise from her ashes?
Someone Odile will never suspect until it is too late.
The carriage lurched into motion. Elizabeth watched the greenhouse disappear behind the hills. Her exile was ending. Her transformation was about to begin. She did not notice the letter that had fallen from Lucien's coat pocket. It lay on the carriage floor, half hidden beneath her muddy hem. The address was partially visible in the growing light. Baron Armand de Morley, 17 Rue de la Paix, Paris. The mirror showed a stranger. Elizabeth turned slowly, examining the woman who stared back at her from the gilded frame. 8 months of transformation had erased every trace of the desperate creature who had knelt in a muddy cemetery. Hold still, madame. The modiste's pins glittered between her lips. The bodice requires adjustment. The black silk clung to Elizabeth's figure like liquid shadow. The cut was Parisian, but the fabric came from Lyon, woven with threads so fine they seemed to absorb the light. A widow's dress, elegant, mysterious, untouchable.
The veil as well, Elizabeth said. I wish to see the complete effect.
The modiste draped black lace across Elizabeth's face. The world softened into gauze and darkness. Behind this barrier, she could watch without being seen. She could strike without warning.
Magnificent!
The modiste stepped back, admiring her work. May I ask, madame, whom you are mourning?
My husband.
Elizabeth's voice carried a slight accent now, something exotic, something unplaceable. He died on our plantation in Martinique. Fever took him within a week. My condolences. And your name for the invoice? Elizabeth smiled beneath the veil. Madame Celeste Vernet. The name tasted foreign on her tongue, but Elizabeth Duval was dead. She had buried that girl alongside her mother in a grave that no one visited, in a cemetery that no one remembered. Celeste Vernet had risen from those ashes, a wealthy widow, a woman of mystery, a ghost with a purpose. She paid in gold coins and walked into the autumn streets of Nice. The attic laboratory smelled of alcohol, orange blossom, and sleepless nights. Elizabeth had rented the top floor of a crumbling villa overlooking the Mediterranean. The landlord asked no questions. The neighbors believed her a grieving widow seeking solitude. She worked by candlelight. Her fingers stained amber from the tinctures. The lunar jasmine essence glowed in its crystal vessel like captured moonlight. Beside it stood rows of smaller vials, rose absolute from Bulgaria, sandalwood from Mysore, ambergris salvaged from a whaling ship, oud so rare that a single gram cost more than a laborer's yearly wage. The formula existed only in her mind. She had burned every written note, terrified that history would repeat itself. This time, no one would steal her creation. A knock at the door. Elizabeth covered her work with a cloth and descended the narrow stairs. Lucien stood in the doorway, a wooden crate balanced on his shoulder. "The civet mask you requested." He pushed past her without invitation. "From Ethiopia. The merchant tried to cheat me twice." "You could have sent a messenger and missed the opportunity to observe your progress." He set down the crate. The villa creaked around them. "I think not." Elizabeth watched him examine her modest quarters. The peeling wallpaper, the second-hand furniture, the single chair by the cold fireplace. If he judged her circumstances, his face revealed nothing. "How close are you?" "Weeks away, perhaps less." She crossed her arms. "Why do you keep helping me, Lucien? You supply me with ingredients worth a fortune. You refuse payment. You appear without warning and disappear without explanation." "I told you, the price will become clear when you have won." "That is not an answer." "It is the only answer you will receive." He turned to face her. His scar caught the candlelight. "You are playing with fire, Madame Vernet. Odile has connections throughout French society. The Baron controls half the shipping routes in the Mediterranean. If they discover your true identity before you are ready, they will destroy you without hesitation." "Then I shall have to be very careful." "You shall have to be perfect." Their eyes locked. Something shifted in the air between them. Elizabeth felt her pulse quicken despite her will. "I am creating something that has never existed before," she said quietly. "A perfume that unlocks memory. One drop, and the wearer experiences their deepest recollections as if they were happening again. Joy, sorrow, love, loss, everything they have buried will rise to the surface. A dangerous gift. A weapon." Elizabeth moved to the window. The sea glittered black beneath the stars. "When Odile smells my creation, she will remember every person she has betrayed, every secret she has stolen, every life she has ruined. Her own memories will condemn her." "And the Baron?" "The Baron has no memories worth preserving. He feels nothing."
She turned back to Lucien. But he understands value. He will see my perfume driving Parisian society mad with desire. He will see mountains of gold waiting to be claimed, and his greed will lead him straight into my trap. Lucien was silent for a long moment. You are either brilliant or insane.
Perhaps both. Elizabeth allowed herself a cold smile. Now leave me. I have work to finish. He moved toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. His hand rested on the frame. I knew your father. Elizabeth's heart stuttered. What? Henri Duval was a great perfumer, perhaps the greatest of his generation. Lucien did not turn around. What happened to him was not an accident, and Odile was not merely his competitor. What are you saying? I'm saying that your revenge has deeper roots than you know. Finish your perfume. Return to Paris. The truth will find you when you are ready. The door closed behind him. Elizabeth stood frozen in the darkness. Her father, dead for 6 years, a failed businessman, they had said, a dreamer who never understood commerce. His laboratory had burned one winter night. His formulas had turned to ash. His reputation had crumbled. He had died broken, believing himself a failure. What did Lucien know? What had Odile done? Elizabeth climbed back to her attic. Her hands trembled as she uncovered her work. The lunar jasmine gleamed, patient and eternal, its scent wrapped around her like an embrace. She would have her answers. But first, she needed her perfume. 3 weeks later, Ombre Celeste was complete. The Paris train station swallowed Elizabeth whole. Steam hissed from iron dragons. Porters shouted in accents she had almost forgotten. The smell of coal smoke and roasting chestnuts filled her nostrils, but beneath it all, she caught the familiar notes of the city that had cast her out. She stepped onto the platform. Black silk rustled against her ankles. The veil hid her face. Gloved hands carried a single leather case. Her first stop was a parfumerie on the left bank. Not Odile's establishment, a smaller shop, hungry for novelty. Elizabeth presented herself as Madame Vernet, recently arrived from the colonies, seeking a Parisian outlet for her exclusive creations. The owner's eyes widened as she opened the case. 6 crystal flacons nestled in velvet. The liquid inside shimmered like captured starlight. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. "What is this?" "Ombre Celeste." Elizabeth's voice was honey and poison. A perfume for those who wish to remember what they have lost. He reached for a sample. She stopped his hand. "Not yet. First, we discuss terms." By evening, she had secured a distribution agreement. By nightfall, whispers of the mysterious widow and her miraculous perfume had begun spreading through the salons. Elizabeth walked alone through the darkening streets. The Levasseur Parfumerie glowed ahead, its windows filled with elegant displays. The centerpiece was unmistakable, a golden flacon etched with stars. Mémoire d'étoile, her stolen masterpiece. She stopped before the glass. Her reflection merged with the display. "I have returned," she whispered, "and I have brought something you cannot imagine." A figure moved inside the shop, a woman in burgundy silk. Gray streaked her elegant coiffure. Her profile was unmistakable. Odile Levasseur stepped closer to the window, examining something in her hands.
Their eyes nearly met through the glass. Elizabeth held her breath. The veil trembled. Odile turned away, oblivious. Elizabeth smiled. The Countess de Beaumont's ballroom blazed with 10,000 candles. Crystal chandeliers threw rainbows across the silk wallpaper. The scent of hothouse roses battled with 100 competing perfumes, each woman desperate to distinguish herself from the glittering herd. Elizabeth descended the marble staircase alone. Her black silk gown whispered against each step.
The veil had been replaced by a delicate half-mask of jet beads, revealing only her crimson lips and the pale column of her throat. She had applied ombre céleste to her pulse points an hour before. The fragrance preceded her like an invisible herald, turning heads before she came into view. "Who is that creature?" A duchess clutched her companion's arm. "The colonial widow, Vernet, I believe. Have you not heard? Her perfume is causing absolute hysteria." "I must have some. Where does one obtain it?" "That is precisely the mystery." Elizabeth allowed herself a small smile. 3 weeks since her return to Paris, and society had become intoxicated with curiosity. Madame Vernet accepted no visitors. Madame Vernet attended only the most exclusive gatherings. Madame Vernet's perfume could not be purchased at any price. The scarcity drove them mad with desire. She moved through the crowd like smoke through silk, acknowledging greetings with a graceful nod, deflecting questions with practiced ambiguity. The sensation of power hummed beneath her skin. These people had ignored Elizabeth Duval. They had stepped over her mother's grave without a glance. Now they fought for crumbs of her attention. A familiar laugh cut through the music. Odile stood near the orchestra, surrounded by admirers. Her gown was mauve silk, trimmed with seed pearls. Diamonds glittered at her ears and throat. She was holding court, describing her latest creation with expansive gestures. "Mémoire d'étoile remains our signature achievement, of course." Odile's voice carried the smug certainty of unchallenged success. "But the new collection promises even greater innovations." Elizabeth watched her former mentor perform. The gracious smile, the modest deflection of praise, the subtle name-dropping that reminded everyone of her connections to royalty. Once, Elizabeth had admired this woman. Once, she had trusted her completely. The memory burned like acid in her throat. "You are staring, madame?" A quiet voice at her shoulder. "One might think you harbor a personal grievance." Elizabeth turned. Lucien stood beside her, impeccable in evening black. His scar had been partially concealed by powder, though traces remained visible in the candlelight. "I was not aware you moved in these circles." "I move in whatever circles serve my purposes." His eyes tracked Odile across the room. "As do you." "I have no idea what you mean." "Of course not." He offered his arm. "Walk with me. You are attracting attention." They circled the perimeter of the ballroom together. Elizabeth felt the weight of curious gazes following their progress. The mysterious widow and the scarred merchant. What delicious scandal. "She has noticed you," Lucien murmured. "Odile. She asked the Countess about you before you arrived." "And what did she learn?" "Nothing useful. A wealthy widow from Martinique. A recluse with exquisite taste in perfume. No family, no history. You have built your mask well." "It is not a mask." Elizabeth's voice hardened. "It is armor." The music changed.
Couples began forming for a waltz. Elizabeth felt a hand on her arm and turned to find herself face to face with Odile Levasseur.
The older woman's smile was radiant. Her eyes were ice. "Madame Verney, at last we meet." She clasped Elizabeth's hands with theatrical warmth. "All of Paris speaks of nothing but your miraculous perfume." "You flatter me, Madame Levasseur." The words tasted like poison. "Your own reputation precedes any possible comparison." "Nonsense." Odile leaned closer, inhaling deeply. "This scent you wear, it is extraordinary. Where did you obtain such lunar jasmine? I was told the flower has been extinct for decades." Elizabeth's pulse quickened, but her expression remained serene. "A family secret, I am afraid. My late husband's estate included certain botanical treasures." "How fortunate!" Odile's grip tightened almost imperceptibly. "I should very much like to discuss a potential collaboration. Two women of talent joining forces against the dreary male establishment." "An intriguing notion." "Shall we escape this crush? The orangery is quite private. We could speak freely." Elizabeth allowed herself to be led through the crowd. The orangery doors opened onto a humid paradise of dwarf citrus trees and tropical flowers. The scent was overwhelming, almost narcotic. Moonlight filtered through the glass roof, casting silver shadows across the terracotta tiles. Odile released her arm and turned, her smile fading to something sharper. "Now then, we are alone." She circled Elizabeth slowly, examining her from every angle. "Who are you?" "Truly, I have made inquiries. There is no record of any Verney plantation in Martinique. No shipping manifests bearing your name. No marriage certificate in any colonial registry." "Perhaps your investigators are incompetent." "Perhaps you are a fraud." The accusation hung in the air between them. Elizabeth felt her carefully constructed calm beginning to crack. "I might say the same of you, Madame Levasseur." "I beg your pardon?" "Mémoire d'étoile." Elizabeth stepped closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "A remarkable achievement for someone who cannot distinguish jasmine from gardenia without a reference guide." Odile's face went pale. "How dare you?" "Some perfumes cannot be stolen, madame. They are born from genius, from suffering, from years of solitary devotion." Elizabeth smiled. The expression held no warmth. "You may wear borrowed plumage, but you will never truly fly." For a single heartbeat, recognition flickered in Odile's eyes. Her lips parted. Her hand rose toward Elizabeth's face. Then the moment passed. The mask returned. "You are impertinent, Madame Verney. But I find myself intrigued rather than offended. We shall speak again. Soon." She swept from the orangery without a backward glance. Elizabeth stood alone among the orange trees, her heart pounding against her ribs. She had gone too far. She had nearly revealed herself. The exhilaration of confronting her enemy had overwhelmed her caution. The night air hit her face as she stepped onto the terrace. She needed to leave. She needed to think. A carriage blocked her path. Black lacquer, gold trim. The door swung open to reveal Baron Armand de Morley. "Madame Verney." His voice was gravel wrapped in silk. "I have been hoping for an introduction." Elizabeth's blood turned to ice. The man who had destroyed her family sat 3 feet away, examining her with the calculating gaze of a butcher assessing livestock.
Baron de Morley. She forced the words through numb lips.
Your reputation precedes you, as does yours.
He did not smile. I understand you possess something of extraordinary value, a perfume that drives women to madness and men to their knees. You exaggerate, sir. I never exaggerate. He leaned forward. His cologne reached her nostrils, cheap musk and greed, unchanged after 2 years. I wish to invest in your enterprise. Name your price. I am not seeking investors. Everyone is seeking investors, madame. They simply do not realize it yet. The Baron produced a card from his waistcoat. Come to my office tomorrow.
10 o'clock. We shall discuss terms that will make you wealthy beyond imagination. He pressed the card into her gloved hand. His fingers lingered against her palm. I look forward to our partnership, Madame Vernet. The carriage rolled away into the darkness. Elizabeth stared at the card. The address burned against her skin. 17 Rue de la Paix. Her childhood home. Now his office. Her mother's bedroom, perhaps converted to a counting house where he tallied his stolen fortunes. She walked home through empty streets, the taste of vengeance growing sweeter with every step. The apartment waited in darkness. Elizabeth lit a single candle and removed her gloves. The evening's events replayed in her mind. Odile's suspicious questions. The Baron's predatory interest. The dance was accelerating. Soon she would need to make her move. A glint of crystal caught her eye. A flacon sat on her writing desk. She had not placed it there. The liquid inside was golden, familiar, impossible. Mémoire d'étoile, her stolen masterpiece. A note lay beneath it. The handwriting was elegant and precise. I know who you are, Elizabeth. The game grows interesting. L.V. The rain had returned to Paris. Elizabeth stood at her window, watching it streak the glass, the note crumpled in her fist. 3 days since finding the flacon on her desk. 3 days of jumping at shadows and questioning every face on every street. Lucien Valmorne knew her true identity. The man who had guided her resurrection now held the power to destroy it completely. One word to Odile, one whisper to the Baron. Her careful architecture would collapse like a house built on sand. She smoothed the note flat against the windowsill. The handwriting mocked her with its elegant confidence. I know who you are, Elizabeth. The game grows interesting. A game? Was that all this had ever been to him? The knock came precisely at noon. Elizabeth did not move to answer it. The door opened anyway. You changed your locks. Lucien stepped inside, shaking rain from his coat. A sensible precaution, though ultimately futile. Get out. Not until we have spoken. He crossed to her writing desk and set down a leather portfolio. You have questions, I have answers. The exchange should prove mutually beneficial. Elizabeth's hand found the letter opener on her bureau. The blade caught the gray light. You have been manipulating me from the beginning. The cemetery, the greenhouse, the ingredients you supplied at such generous terms. What is your game, Monsieur Valmorel? My game, as you call it, began long before you were born. He sat without invitation, crossing his legs with infuriating ease. Your father and I were partners once. Did you know that? The words struck like a slap. Elizabeth's grip tightened on the letter opener. You lie.
I never lie about Henri Duval.
Lucien's voice softened. He was brilliant. Possibly the most gifted perfumer of the century. His understanding of aromatic chemistry surpassed anything the industry had ever seen. We built Valmorin and Sons together. My capital, his genius.
That is impossible. My father worked alone. He had no partners.
That is what Odile wanted you to believe. Lucien opened the portfolio and spread its contents across the desk. Documents, contracts, faded letters in handwriting Elizabeth recognized instantly. Her father's hand, his elegant script flowing across yellowed paper. She moved closer despite herself. The letter opener clattered forgotten to the floor. These contracts detail our arrangement, Lucien continued. 60% to your father, 40% to me. We were developing something revolutionary, a method of capturing scent memories directly from the human mind. Your father called it l'essence de l'âme, the essence of the soul. Elizabeth's hands trembled as she lifted a letter dated 15 years past. My dearest Lucien, the ink read, the breakthrough approaches. I have isolated the compound that unlocks memory within fragrance. Soon we will change the world. But I fear we are being watched. Odile asks too many questions. Her interest in my research has grown concerning. She stole from him, Elizabeth whispered, just as she stole from me. She did far worse than steal. Lucien's jaw tightened. Odile was never a true perfumer. She recognized early that her talents were limited, but she possessed other gifts. Ambition, ruthlessness, the ability to identify genius in others and claim it for herself. How did she do it? She seduced him. The word dropped into silence like a stone into still water. Your mother was pregnant with you when Odile entered Henri's life. She was young then, beautiful. She presented herself as a student, eager to learn at the master's feet. Your father was lonely. Your mother was consumed with the pregnancy. Odile saw her opportunity and took it. Elizabeth sank into the chair opposite Lucien. Her legs would no longer support her weight. The affair lasted 2 years. By the time it ended, Odile had copied every formula in his laboratory. She had learned his methods. She had extracted his secrets through whispered intimacies and stolen moments in the workroom. Did my mother know? She discovered the truth the night your father died. The words hung between them like poison mist. The fire that destroyed his laboratory was not an accident. Lucien's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. Odile said it deliberately. Your father had finally recognized her treachery. He had threatened to expose her, to reclaim his formulas through the courts. She killed him. She protected her investment. To Odile, there was no distinction. Elizabeth pressed her hands against her face. The world had tilted on its axis. Everything she thought she knew about her family history was crumbling into ash. Your mother confronted Odile the following morning, Lucien continued. She had proof, letters, witnesses who had seen them together. Odile could have been ruined. Instead, she made a deal. What deal? Silence in exchange for financial support. Odile agreed to provide a monthly stipend to your mother, enough to maintain the townhouse, enough to preserve appearances. In return, your mother would speak nothing of the affair or the fire.
My mother took money from the woman who murdered my father?
Your mother had a newborn daughter to protect. She had no family, no resources, no one to turn to. Lucian's eyes held something almost like compassion. She made an impossible choice. She chose survival. Elizabeth stood abruptly. She could not remain seated. She paced the small apartment like a caged animal, her mind reeling with revelations. "The Baron," she said suddenly. "Where does he fit into this grotesque tapestry?" Armand de Morley was Odile's lover for many years. Perhaps he still is. He provided the capital for her perfumery. In return, she shared information, trade secrets, competitor weaknesses. Together they have destroyed dozens of smaller houses. And my family's debts were manufactured. The Baron holds paper that should never have existed. Your father owed him nothing.
The contracts were forged after the fire, when there was no one left to contest them. Elizabeth stopped pacing. She turned to face Lucian directly.
Why tell me this now? Why not reveal it months ago, in Grasse?
Because you were not ready. Lucian rose from his chair. He moved toward her slowly, as one approaches a wild creature. Anger alone would have consumed you. Grief would have paralyzed you. You needed to become strong first. You needed to build your arsenal.
And Ombre Celeste?
Is the weapon your father never completed. Lucian stood close enough now that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. L'essence de l'âme, the perfume that unlocks memory. You have recreated his life's work without even knowing it. You used me. I guided you. There is a difference.
Is there?
Lucian raised his hand. His fingers brushed a strand of hair from her face. The touch was gentle, almost reverent. Your father was my dearest friend. His death has haunted me for 20 years. Every night I see that burning laboratory. Every morning I wake with his name on my lips. He lifted the portfolio from the desk. This is not merely your revenge, Elizabeth. It is mine as well. She studied his face, the scar, the shadows beneath his eyes, the weight of decades carried in the lines around his mouth.
What would you have me do?
What you were already planning. Lucian placed the portfolio in her hands. But now you have proof. Legal documents that prove the Baron's fraud. Letters that implicate Odile in arson and theft. Enough evidence to destroy them both.
Evidence is not enough. Courts can be bought, judges can be bribed.
Then you must find another way. Lucien moved toward the door. The exhibition at the Palais des Beaux-Arts opens in 1 week. All of Parisian society will attend. Odile plans to unveil her new collection. The Baron will be at her side. And you suggest I make my move there? I suggest nothing. The choice is yours. It has always been yours. He opened the door. The sound of rain filled the apartment. One final question, Elizabeth called after him. If you knew Odile was dangerous, why did you allow me to apprentice with her in the first place? Lucien paused on the threshold. When he turned, his expression held something she had never seen before. Shame. Because I was a coward. I watched her circle you like a vulture, and I did nothing. That failure will haunt me until my dying breath. The door closed behind him. Elizabeth stood alone with her father's letters pressed against her heart. The Palais des Beaux-Arts had transformed into a temple of vanity.
Velvet drapes the color of burgundy wine cascaded from the vaulted ceilings. Crystal displays showcased perfume bottles like sacred relics. The cream of Parisian society moved through the exhibition halls, their whispers blending into a constant murmur beneath the string quartet's melodies. Elizabeth arrived precisely at 8 o'clock. Her gown was midnight blue this time, embroidered with silver thread that caught the gaslight like scattered stars. She had abandoned mourning colors deliberately. Madame Verney was emerging from her grief. Madame Verney was ready to conquer. The leather portfolio remained locked in her apartment, but its contents burned in her memory. Every letter, every contract, every damning word that proved her father's murder and the theft of his legacy. She had spent 6 days memorizing the documents, planning her approach, rehearsing the confrontation that would destroy her enemies. Tonight was reconnaissance. Tomorrow would be war. Madame Verney. The Countess de Beaumont materialized at her elbow. "How delightful to see you venturing into the light at last. Your perfume continues to drive my friends absolutely mad with envy." "You are too kind, Countess." "Nonsense. I have arranged a small dinner party next week. You must attend. The Duchess of Orleans has specifically requested an introduction." Elizabeth murmured appropriate gratitude while scanning the crowd. Odile had not yet appeared. The Baron's distinctive silver hair was nowhere in evidence. She accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and began her circuit of the exhibition. The Levasseur display dominated the central hall. A massive crystal fountain released delicate puffs of perfumed mist at regular intervals. The new collection occupied gilded pedestals arranged in a crescent formation. Memoire d'Étoile held the place of honor, its familiar golden flacon catching the light from a dozen angles. Elizabeth paused before her stolen creation. The scent reached her nostrils, and for a moment she was 19 again, innocent, hopeful. Working through the night in Odile's laboratory, believing herself blessed by fortune. "Beautiful, is it not?" The voice sent ice down her spine. Odile had appeared beside her without warning. Tonight she wore emerald silk that complemented her aging complexion. Her smile was a masterpiece of false warmth. "Memoire d'Étoile represents everything I have worked toward," Odile continued. "The culmination of a lifetime's devotion to the art of perfumery." "Indeed." Elizabeth's voice remained steady through sheer force of will. "One might almost believe you created it yourself." "What an odd thing to say." "Merely an observation, Madame Levasseur. Great artists often inspire lesser talents to claim reflected glory." Odile's smile flickered. Her eyes narrowed with something that might have been fear. "You speak in riddles, Madame Verney. Perhaps the colonial air has affected your manners." "My manners are perfectly intact, as is my memory." The words hung between them. Elizabeth watched recognition struggle to surface in Odile's expression. The older woman knew something was wrong. She sensed the danger circling her like a shark beneath dark waters, but she could not yet name it. "We should speak privately," Odile said at last. "There is a salon reserved for exhibitors on the second floor." "I think not." Elizabeth turned away from the display. "Not tonight, at any rate. But soon, Madame Levasseur. Very soon." She walked into the crowd without looking back. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her steps remained measured, controlled. The first blow had landed. The enemy was wounded. The evening continued its glittering progression. Elizabeth moved through conversations like smoke, gathering information, planting seeds of doubt about the Levasseur collection. She mentioned inconsistencies in Odile's public biography. She raised questions about the mysterious fire that had destroyed a rival perfumer 2 decades past. She watched the whispers spread from group to group like ripples across a pond. At 10:30, the Baron finally arrived. Baron de Morley swept into the exhibition hall with the confidence of a man who owned everything he surveyed. His evening clothes were immaculate. His silver hair gleamed beneath the chandeliers. He moved directly to Odile's side, and Elizabeth observed their interaction from behind a marble column. They were arguing. The Baron's face had flushed with anger. Odile gestured emphatically, her usual composure cracking. Their voices remained too low for Elizabeth to discern words, but the tension between them was unmistakable. Trouble in paradise, perhaps. Cracks in the foundation of their partnership. She filed the observation away for future use.
They fight more frequently now.
Lucian's voice came from her right.
The colonial competition is straining their alliance.
What colonial competition?
Your perfume has captured markets they considered secure. 3 of the Baron's shipping clients have switched their contracts to distribute Ombre Celeste instead of the Levasseur collection. The financial losses are significant.
Elizabeth allowed herself a small smile. Excellent.
Do not celebrate prematurely.
Lucian stepped closer, lowering his voice.
The Baron has begun investigating Madame Rene's background more thoroughly. He has hired a detective agency.
They are tracing shipping records from Martinique.
There are no records to find.
Exactly. The absence of evidence is itself suspicious. You have perhaps 2 weeks before they discover your identity is fabricated.
Then I shall have to accelerate my plans. The string quartet paused between movements. In the sudden silence, Odile's voice carried clearly across the hall. That woman is dangerous, Armand. I am telling you, there is something familiar about her, something I cannot place.
You are imagining threats where none exist.
The Baron's dismissive tone was audible.
She is a wealthy widow seeking attention, nothing more.
She knew about the formula. She practically accused me of theft.
Then we shall deal with her appropriately.
The Baron's voice dropped to a hiss,
as we have dealt with others who asked too many questions.
Elizabeth's blood ran cold. As we have dealt with others. Her father.
Her mother's slow decline. How many lives had these 2 destroyed in their pursuit of wealth and status? The music resumed, the moment passed, but Elizabeth had heard enough. She found Lucien waiting by the exit.
I am hosting a private demonstration tomorrow evening, she said quietly, at the Salon Riche on the Champs-Élysées. I have already sent invitations to the most influential critics and buyers in Paris.
And Odile?
She will receive her invitation in the morning.
Elizabeth met his eyes.
Along with a gift, a sample of Ombre Celeste, specially prepared for her pleasure.
Lucien's expression shifted. Understanding dawned. You are going to make her remember.
I'm going to make her confess. The perfume will unlock every secret she has buried, every crime she has committed, every life she has destroyed. When she inhales my creation, she will experience 20 years of guilt compressed into a single moment.
That could destroy her mind entirely.
That is rather the point.
Lucian was silent for a long moment. The gaslight carved shadows across his scarred face. And the Baron? He will attend as well.
I have prepared something special for him." Elizabeth pulled her cloak around her shoulders. A variation of the formula that amplifies greed rather than memory. When he smells it, he will be unable to resist any financial opportunity I present. He will sign any contract, agree to any terms.
You mean to ruin him legally?
I mean to make him sign a confession of every fraud he has perpetrated against my family.
Then I shall present it to the magistrates along with my father's documents. The night air hit her face as they stepped onto the street. Paris glittered around them, indifferent to the drama unfolding in its shadows. "Elizabeth," Lucien caught her arm, "what you are planning is extraordinarily dangerous. If anything goes wrong, they will destroy you without hesitation." "Then nothing shall go wrong." "You cannot control memory. You cannot predict how people will react when confronted with their deepest sins. Odile may break entirely. The Baron may turn violent." "I have considered the risks." "Have you?" His grip tightened. "This is not merely revenge anymore. This is justice. And justice requires witnesses, documentation, protection against retaliation." "What are you suggesting?" "Allow me to arrange security. Private guards who answer only to me. Journalists who can record the confession for publication. Legal representatives who can file charges immediately." Elizabeth studied his face. The urgency in his voice seemed genuine, but she had trusted before. And that trust had nearly destroyed her. "Why should I believe you will not betray me at the crucial moment?" "Because your father trusted me until his last breath." Lucien released her arm. "And because his daughter deserves the revenge he was denied." A carriage waited at the curb. Elizabeth climbed inside without answering. The door closed between them. She rode home through empty streets, planning the final act of her long performance. Tomorrow night, the curtain would rise on Odile Levasseur's destruction. The Salon Riche occupied the entire third floor of a Belle Époque mansion overlooking the Champs-Élysées. Elizabeth had spent her remaining savings transforming the space into an intimate theater of revelation. Crimson velvet draped the walls. Candelabras cast flickering shadows across the gilded moldings. The air itself had been perfumed with subtle bass notes that would harmonize with ombre céleste when the moment arrived. 50 chairs arranged in concentric semicircles faced a raised platform. Behind it, a curtained alcove concealed the crystal atomizers Elizabeth had prepared with meticulous care. Each one contained a slightly different variation of her formula: memory for Odile, greed for the Baron, simple enchantment for the critics and buyers who would serve as witnesses. She checked the preparations for the 7th time as evening approached. "The journalists have arrived." Lucien entered through the service door. 3 from the Figaro, 2 from La Presse, 1 from the London Times. They believe they are covering an exclusive perfume launch. Good. And the legal representatives? Waiting in the anteroom with notarized documents. If the Baron signs anything tonight, it will be immediately binding. Elizabeth adjusted a candelabra that needed no adjustment. Her hands required occupation, or they would betray her nervousness. "She will come," Lucien said quietly. "Odile cannot resist the challenge you represent." "I know. And you are prepared for what must happen." Elizabeth turned to face him. In the candlelight, he looked almost gentle. The scar softened into shadow, the hardness around his eyes temporarily erased. "I have dreamed of this moment for 2 years."
She smoothed the silk of her crimson gown.
Every night I have imagined watching Odile's face as she realizes the truth. Every morning, I have rehearsed the words I will speak when she finally understands who I am. Revenge is a strange companion. It sustains us when nothing else remains. But it also consumes us if we are not careful. Are you suggesting I should show mercy? I am suggesting you should be prepared for the possibility that victory may taste different than you imagined. Before Elizabeth could respond, the sound of arriving carriages drifted through the windows. The guests were assembling. The final performance was about to begin. The salon filled with the rustle of silk and the murmur of anticipation. Critics claimed the front rows, their notebooks ready. Buyers from the great department stores occupied the middle section. Society figures filled the remaining seats, drawn by rumors of the mysterious Madame Vernet's revolutionary creation. Elizabeth watched from behind the curtained alcove as the room reached capacity. Her heart maintained a steady rhythm despite the magnitude of what she was about to attempt. 2 years of preparation had led to this single evening. Every sacrifice, every humiliation, every sleepless night in dusty attics and borrowed laboratories. At precisely 8 o'clock, the Baron entered. Baron de Morley looked magnificent in his evening clothes. His silver hair gleamed, his posture radiated authority. He nodded to acquaintances as he moved down the center aisle, selecting a seat in the second row with the casual confidence of a man who expected the best. 5 minutes later, Odile appeared. She had dressed for battle. Her gown was royal purple, trimmed with black lace. Amethysts glittered at her throat and ears. She scanned the room with predatory attention before taking the seat beside the Baron. Their heads bent together in whispered conference. Elizabeth counted to 10. Then she stepped onto the platform. The murmuring ceased. Every eye turned toward her. She stood in silence for a long moment, allowing the tension to build. "Distinguished guests," her voice carried clearly through the acoustically designed space, "I thank you for attending this intimate gathering. You have come to witness the unveiling of Ombre Celeste, a perfume unlike any created before." She gestured, and an assistant drew back the curtain behind her. The crystal atomizers glittered like captured stars. What you are about to experience goes beyond mere fragrance. Ombre Celeste does not simply adorn the skin. It awakens the soul. It unlocks doors that have remained sealed for decades. It reveals truths that lie buried beneath the comfortable surface of everyday existence. Elizabeth moved toward the atomizers. Her fingers brushed the crystal with practiced familiarity. Before we proceed, I must share a story of genius stolen, of lives destroyed, of justice delayed but never abandoned. The room had grown utterly still. Even the Baron's perpetual smirk had faded to watchful attention. 20 years ago, a brilliant perfumer named Henri Duval developed a revolutionary formula. A perfume that could capture and release human memory itself. He called it l'essence de l'âme, the essence of the soul. Elizabeth watched Odile's face. The color was draining slowly from her carefully rouged cheeks. Henri Duval had a partner, a woman he trusted with his secrets, his formulas, his dreams. Elizabeth's voice hardened. That woman betrayed him. She stole his work. She set fire to his laboratory.
She watched him die and built her empire on the ashes of his genius. "This is outrageous!" Odile rose from her chair. "I did not come here to be subjected to slanderous accusations." "Sit down, Madame Levasseur."
Elizabeth's command cracked through the air like a whip. "We have not reached the most interesting part." Something in her tone made Odile hesitate. The older woman sank back into her seat, her hands gripping the armrests.
"Henri Duval was my father."
Elizabeth removed her gloves slowly, deliberately.
"And the woman who destroyed him sits among you tonight."
Gasps rippled through the audience. The journalists scribbled furiously. The Baron had gone very still, his eyes calculating escape routes.
"I have documentation proving every accusation. Contracts bearing my father's signature, letters detailing his research, evidence of the fire that consumed his laboratory and his life." Elizabeth lifted one of the crystal atomizers. "But evidence alone is not enough. The courts can be corrupted, the truth can be buried. So I have prepared something more persuasive." She pressed the atomizer. A fine mist drifted toward the audience.
Ombre Celeste carries my father's final gift to the world. The formula he died protecting. The perfume that unlocks memory. The fragrance reached the front rows. Critics inhaled deeply, their expressions shifting from skepticism to wonder. One woman began to weep silently, lost in some private recollection. "Those of you with clear consciences will experience beauty." Elizabeth moved forward, the atomizer raised. "Those who carried guilt will find themselves confronting truths they have long suppressed." She stopped directly before Odile. "Shall we discover what secrets hide behind your carefully constructed facade, Madame Levasseur?"
"You are insane."
Odile's voice trembled.
"I will not participate in this theatrical nonsense."
"You do not have a choice." Elizabeth pressed the atomizer. The mist enveloped Odile's face before she could react. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then Odile's expression began to change. Her eyes widened, her lips parted. Her hands flew to her temples as if trying to contain something exploding inside her skull.
"No."
The word emerged as a moan.
"No, please. I did not mean to. The fire spread too quickly. Henri, I am sorry. I am so sorry."
The audience watched in horrified fascination as Odile Levasseur began to confess.
"The formulas were mine. She deserved nothing. She was weak, stupid. She never understood what I sacrificed."
Odile's voice rose to a wail.
"The daughter. I took everything from the daughter. She trusted me completely, and I crushed her like an insect."
Elizabeth stood motionless, watching 20 years of buried guilt pour from her enemy's lips. The journalists captured every word. The witnesses sat frozen in their seats. But something was wrong. The Baron had risen from his chair. His hand had disappeared inside his coat. When it emerged, it held a small pistol. "Enough!" His voice cut through Odile's rambling confession. "I do not know what witchcraft you have employed, but this farce ends now." He aimed the weapon directly at Elizabeth's heart. "You are Henri Duval's daughter." The recognition in his eyes held no remorse. "I should have eliminated the entire family when I had the chance." The pistol gleamed in the candlelight.
Elizabeth stared into its dark eye and felt time compress into a single crystalline moment. The Baron's finger tightened on the trigger. The audience sat paralyzed with shock. Odile continued her broken confession, oblivious to everything except the memories consuming her mind. This was not how the story was supposed to end. "Armand!" Lucien's voice cut through the tension. His tall figure emerged from the shadows near the service door. "You do not want to do this." "Valmorin," the Baron's aim wavered slightly. "I should have known you were involved in this circus." "Lower the weapon. There are 50 witnesses, journalists." "Legal representatives. You cannot silence them all." "Watch me." The Baron swung the pistol toward Lucien. In that instant of distraction, Elizabeth moved. Her hand closed around the second atomizer. The formula inside was not ombre celeste. It was something far more dangerous, a concentration so powerful that a single breath could overwhelm any human mind. She had prepared it as a last resort, never truly believing she would need to use it. She pressed the mechanism and directed the spray directly into the Baron's face. The effect was instantaneous. Armand de Morley staggered backward, the pistol discharging harmlessly into the ceiling. Plaster rained down on the screaming audience. The Baron collapsed to his knees, his hands clawing at his throat as decades of suppressed guilt crashed through his consciousness like a tidal wave. "The contracts," his voice emerged as a tortured rasp. "Forged. All of them forged. The Duval estate, the shipping companies, the textile mills. I stole everything. I destroyed everyone who stood in my way." The journalists rushed forward, notebooks ready. The legal representatives emerged from their anteroom, documents in hand. 2 private guards Lucien had stationed at the exits moved to secure the Baron's fallen weapon. Elizabeth stood at the center of the chaos, trembling with exhaustion and triumph. "Madame Duval," one of the journalists pushed through the crowd. "Is that your true name?" "Elizabeth Duval?" "Elizabeth." She drew herself upright. "Elizabeth Duval." Daughter of Henri Duval, the rightful creator of Mémoire d'Étoile and dozens of other formulas stolen by Odile Levasseur. The room erupted with questions. Elizabeth answered them mechanically, her eyes never leaving the 2 broken figures before her. Odile had curled into a fetal position on the floor, still murmuring fragments of confession. The Baron knelt beside her, his once commanding presence reduced to a shaking shell. This was victory. This was the moment she had sacrificed everything to achieve. So why did she feel so hollow? The authorities arrived within the hour. Gendarmes in their distinctive uniforms escorted Odile and the Baron from the salon. The legal representatives followed, clutching documents that would ensure both faced justice for their crimes. The journalists scattered to their respective offices, racing to be first with the sensational story of fraud, murder, and revenge that would dominate the morning papers. By midnight, Elizabeth stood alone on the platform where her triumph had unfolded. "You should rest." Lucien approached slowly, as if afraid of startling a wild creature. "The evening has been extraordinarily demanding." "I cannot feel my hands." Elizabeth stared at her palms. The atomizer had left faint chemical burns across her fingers. "I cannot feel anything at all." "That is normal. The aftermath of such intense emotion often produces numbness." "Is this what you felt when you learned my father had died?"
Lucienne was silent for a long moment. I felt rage, then grief, then a coldness that lasted for many years. He moved to stand beside her, but I also felt relief. The burden of secrets is heavier than most people realize. Setting it down, even through tragedy, brings its own strange peace. Elizabeth turned to face him. In the dying candlelight,
He looked older than she had ever seen him. The scar stood out sharply against his pale skin.
"What happens now?"
The courts will handle Odile and the Baron. The evidence is overwhelming. They will spend their remaining years in prison, stripped of everything they stole.
And the perfumery?
Legally, it belongs to you. Everything Odile built was constructed on your father's genius. The formulas, the techniques, the reputation. With proper documentation, you can reclaim the entire enterprise.
Elizabeth laughed. The sound was bitter, hollow. "I do not want it." She gestured at the empty room. "I do not want any of it. The business, the society connections, the endless performances and deceptions." "Then what do you want?" The question hung in the air between them. Elizabeth walked to the window and looked out at the sleeping city. Paris glittered beneath a canopy of stars, indifferent to the drama that had unfolded in its midst. "I want to create." Her voice was barely above a whisper.
Not for revenge, not for profit, not to prove anything to anyone. I want to make beautiful things simply because they deserve to exist. That is perhaps the purest motivation an artist can possess. Is it enough? It will have to be.
Elizabeth turned from the window. She reached into her gown and withdrew a small crystal flagon. The liquid inside caught the moonlight, transforming it into something almost mystical. "This is the original Ombre Celeste, not the version I used tonight, not the weapon I created for revenge. This is the perfume as my father envisioned it, a celebration of memory rather than an instrument of torture." She pressed the flagon into Lucienne's hands. "I want you to have it."
Elizabeth, I cannot accept.
"You preserved my father's memory when everyone else had forgotten him." She closed his fingers around the crystal. "You guided me when I had lost everything. You believed in me when I could not believe in myself. This belongs with you."
Lucien stared at the flacon. When he looked up, his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Your father would be proud of you."
"I know." They stood together in silence as the candles burned down to their final inches. The night stretched toward dawn, carrying with it the remnants of old grief and the first whispers of new possibility. 3 months later, Elizabeth opened a small parfumerie on the Rue de Rivoli. The shop occupied a modest corner building with large windows that flooded the workspace with natural light.
She had named it simply Duval, honoring her father's legacy without claiming his genius as her own. The opening was quiet. No society patrons crowded the entrance. No journalists clamored for exclusive interviews. Instead, a small group of genuine enthusiasts explored her creations with careful attention and honest appreciation. Lucien arrived at noon, carrying a bouquet of lunar jasmine he had cultivated especially for the occasion.
"The flowers are blooming." He set them on her workbench. "The specimens you brought from Grasse have adapted beautifully to the Parisian climate." "Perhaps they simply needed proper care." "Perhaps we all do." Elizabeth arranged the jasmine in a crystal vase.
Their fragrance filled the small space, mingling with the dozens of experimental blends she had developed since the night of her triumph. "I read that Odile's trial concluded yesterday," Lucien said carefully.
"I know."
"She received 15 years. The Baron received 20.
The courts were not merciful.
"They received what they deserved."
Elizabeth's voice held no satisfaction, no lingering anger, only acceptance. "And how do you feel?" She considered the question seriously before answering.
"I feel like myself. For the first time since my mother died, I know exactly who I am and what I want." She gestured at the shelves of her modest shop. "This is enough. This is everything."
A customer entered, a young woman with ink-stained fingers and the distracted air of an artist. Elizabeth moved to greet her, leaving Lucien standing among the jasmine blossoms. He watched her work, watched her explain the nuances of different florals, the marriage of citrus and musk, the way memory and emotion could be captured in a single drop of liquid. Her passion was genuine, her knowledge was profound, her talent was entirely her own. Henri Duval's daughter had finally come home. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, gilding the crystal flacons with amber and gold.
Elizabeth laughed at something the young customer said. The sound was free of bitterness, free of calculation, free of the terrible weight she had carried for so long. Revenge had been necessary, but this, finally, was what she had truly been seeking all along. Not destruction, not victory, not the downfall of her enemies, simply the right to exist as herself, creating beauty from the fragments of loss and the persistence of hope.